Hey gang, Ed here, and I've got a cracker for you today. In the past series, we were talking about having a help you pick a niche. Now, of course, we want to test the niche to make sure you're not going to waste your time. So I've developed a new process, and in this series of videos, I'm going to show you how I came up with the concept, researched it, explored it, and eventually created a prompt called the Persona Forge. In this particular video, there's going to be lots of insights in terms of working with prompts and working with ChatGPT. Now, if you want to get the whole box and dice, if you can't wait for the series of videos to roll out, in the description below, you'll see that there is a link to a page where you can download the entire report with all the screenshots of the research, the processes that I took, everything, right? And it's all there in that report. Otherwise, sit back, relax. Actually, before you relax, hit that like button, slap that bell, hit that subscribe button, and let me take you on a journey. So the first thing you're going to ask me is, hey, did you miss the market research part before we go and test the market? No, I didn't. That's very deliberate. It's actually a really important part of the whole challenge philosophy is the recognition that those of you who are watching this are often doing other things. You've got full-time jobs or you're doing everything. And this is something that you want to turn from a side hustle into a full-time job. We've got to make sure that everything we do is super quick for you to test. We've got to make sure that it's safe for you. And frankly, we've got to make sure it's cheap. Fortunately, AI does an enormous amount to help you. The reason we don't have market research and instead say market testing is, for a start, it's active. After picking the niche, challenges in the old days had the huge hurdle for them was test and researching the niche. People would just get stuck in research and wondering, will this work? Will this be effective? About 35% of you watching this are the type of people we refer to as high fact finder. You want to do all your research before you take action, and that's brilliant. It's a great. The issue is when you're starting a business, we really can't tell whether the niche is going to be good or not unless we get in there, roll our sleeves up and test it. It was a huge hurdle. We lost people and all they would ever do is research and they never get into the active part of being with the market. And there were a few reasons for that. The first thing, when you market researching, you can research forever if you want. There's no specific stop line. When we design market testing, there's a specific set of steps for you to follow. And because we're following those steps, and particularly with the enhancement of, then you're never going to get stuck because there's a series of steps with very clearly defined action points. That's what we want to replicate with this testing process. It's nice and active, so you'll do the work. The other reason we do this is because it's practical. Imagine you do all this research, you still have to test the market. Will people speak to you? Will they communicate? Do you know where they are? You have to test to see whether there's actual interest. And imagine the devastation and all the effort and energy you put in. Let's cut to the chase and test our market at the same time. It makes so much sense. And as you'll discover, now that we have AI as our partner in this, it's incredible how much more effective and efficient you can be. When you're testing a market, there are about 10 individual tests. Now, stay with me because as you will discover, we can really compress that. Able to go from excited but clueless about a niche to having a strong understanding of the niche in literally minutes. In the old days, this part of market testing would at least take 1 to 2 weeks. It's amazing. What you'll start to discover in this particular section is we utilize perhaps one of the most discussed parts of ChatGPT, which the researchers often have discovered is it's actually the best thing at. It's role-playing and having conversations. This is vital for market testing, as it turns out. For example, you can have ChatGPT take on the role of a well-known person, anybody who's got a extensive body of internet work, a footprint. You could perhaps choose a cheeky Australian marketer who happened to have a lot to say pre-November 2021 and use those people or somebody with actual talent. And you can ask ChatGPT to role play as them and it does a remarkably good job. You can also ask it to role play, say, as a professor of marketing. Not sure why you'd want a professor of marketing, but you could. It's amazing at that. Here's the problem. When we're testing markets, we need to have conversations with Joe and Jane Smith. And what are the characteristics of Joe and Jane Smith that make them interested in our market. So we really need to create, and it's called many things in many parts of the world. You could call it an avatar. You could call it a character profile. I'm choosing, because it sounds cool and it's actually more relevant to what we're doing, we need ChatGPT to create a persona for us of our typical person who's interested in our market, so we can then have conversations with it. And frankly, spoiler alert, it's pretty bloody amazing. Now, the problem with creating a persona is if you're relatively new to the market, you probably don't have a lot of details. You probably haven't thought deeply about all the characteristics, of which there are a significant number of things which go to make up a character which is representative of your market. You need to do this in traditional marketing as well, right? What's incredible is that ChatGPT will allow us to create that persona. But there's another issue as well. Even if you're an expert on the market, you tend to skip on a lot of the details in describing people who are interested in your market. Often people just simply go for the demographics. Women aged over 55, men who live in Louisiana, right? Demographics, that's the top. We know as marketers that it's the psychographics that are important. What are their likes and interests? What are their behaviors? What are those sorts of things to do? They're much more tricky to figure out unless you happen to have a help AI assistant. Oh, before we get into it, there's a link in the description. Click on that. It'll take you to a page where you'll be able to download the entire report, all the details, all the conversation, everything that we're talking about, right? So you'll have that, and I won't bore people on here going through big long lines of text. This is not a super prompt. What you're about to see is a super conversation. When we created the Ikigai super prompt, hopefully you'll see a link roughly around here somewhere to that playlist. We created what is called a super prompt. A super prompt is a multi-step process. It runs like a mini program, but in plain understandable English. The PersonaForge prompt didn't start off like that at all. It started as a super conversation. As I started this session, I really wanted to explore what ChatGPT was capable of. Before I even go about writing the prompt, I needed to figure out, hey, what did it know? What could it do? What you're about to discover is things went in a very unexpected but pretty darn super cool direction. Let's talk about framing a conversation. One of the theories that I have about working with ChatGPT is I like to imagine I'm working with a super incredibly knowledgeable person that doesn't have any of the experience or life skills that I have, or indeed any human has. If I'm walking up to a colleague in the workplace and I want them to do something for me, if I just hand over the thing and say, do this, it's not a very comfortable experience, right? For me to make sure that everything goes well, we have to give some context. We have to give people reasons why, because that then allows them to do a better job. So here's how I started the conversation with ChatGPT. Hey, ChatGPT, I want your help describing a character. I want you to role play with me. You're going to act as the customer in my target market, and I'll be asking you questions to help with my research. Does that make sense? ChatGPT then responded with, absolutely. This sounds like a great way to gain insights about your target market. Please describe the character I should role play as for you. This answer was not perfect. ChatGPT missed some stuff, as humans do as well. It missed the I want your help part. But here's the interesting thing. You'll see that really it's heavy emphasis on the role-playing elements and very light emphasis on me asking for its help. So I can see why it responded the way it did. So most prompt engineers and programmers seeing that response would immediately stop and then write a request, which is totally fine. You can do it that way. If I'm having a chat with a coworker and wanting them to do something and their response clearly gave me the feeling that it was misunderstood, then okay, I would rephrase it. I would continue the conversation. So I said, that's where I need your help. I want you to be as helpful as possible. So in describing the character for you for this role play, what type of characteristics would be helpful for you? Oh my God. This is me being a human correcting ChatGPT. Really human, because look at that spelling and grammar. It's atrocious. It's amazing how it, thank God. Boy, lucky for me. I want to show you how I brainstorm with ChatGPT. So here's what ChatGPT responded. Look, as you can see here, that talks demographics, psychographics, needs and challenges, goals and aspirations, preferred communication channels, buying habits, usage, and saying, hey, give me as much information as you can as it'll aid in creating a more realistic simulation. Particularly as you go into the detail of that, and again, all of this is down below. This is a great list. no notes. The twist, no one saw coming. And when I say no one, really it's me. I didn't see it coming, but I'm pretty sure you'll be surprised too. What makes humans pretty extraordinary is our ability to make leaps in having imagination is what makes us special. And frankly, not something that ChatGPT is capable of, which is why it makes you and ChatGPT such a great team. Instead of rewriting the prompt, I thought, let's go with it. And I wrote, awesome, let's test this out. Can you do your best to get me all this information you requested in the previous question for people who love making sausages? Get ready for yet another head exploding moment. But before that, what's the deal with sausage making? See, I'm going to explain it, okay? There is relevance. It's not because I have the humor of a 12-year-old. I do have the humor of a 12-year-old. So, going way back into ancient history, when we first started the challenge, we felt it was really important to do real live testing. And boy, I could tell you some stories about how I left $80,000 on the table by spelling Sudoku wrong. Whatever market we used, we would literally have 1,000 people all copy it exactly the same. And it actually caused a real problem, particularly back in the early days. All of a sudden, the search engines would be filled with all of this stuff. Perhaps because I have the humor of a 12-year-old boy, I thought sausage making would be hilarious because surely that's not really a niche. I was wrong about that. We could only use sausage making for 1 year because it was a excellent niche. So we only got to use sausage making for 1 year. We then went with underwater kickboxing because surely that's not a thing. It's a thing. Turns out that was a training methodology in Thailand for kickboxers. Everything's a niche, gang. Everything's a niche. You can make 10 grand a month in anything. Anyway, so using sausage making here is a bit of a throwback for the many people, and I'm so thrilled you're here that have rejoined the channel since I've come out of retirement. A little bit of a throwback for the OGs. And it's a serious niche now, very much, but it is, I thought, relatively small. So the question was, can ChatGPT do it? Yes, they can. Shout out to Bob the Builder. Here is ChatGPT serving the tea. Check this out. Sure, let's build a profile for a typical sausage making enthusiast. Please note, this is a hypothetical customer profile. I'm not going to read all of this out. And again, you heard the spiel. Again, all of this research, everything is put together in a really cool report for you just down below in the descriptions. But this checks, like if I just pick a couple of things. You're a 45-year-old man living in Austin, Texas, bachelor's degree, software engineer, annual income's around $120,000. Check. Short-term goal, perfecting recipes. You take time researching before buying anything. You appreciate quality over cost. But this, it's taken usage, buying habits, communication channels, goals and aspirations, needs and challenges, and it creates a character. Look, I am not an expert in this niche by any stretch of the imagination, but I think if you went through the Ikigai niche selection process and you're at this step where you're testing the marketplace, I figure you've got a little bit of an idea about a market. And let me tell you, this checks out. It passes the sniff test. It smells like bratwurst. Cheesy bratwurst. I was so happy with this response. I thought, excellent. Let's create a prompt and we can move on. Job done. ChatGPT had other ideas. I asked ChatGPT, that's amazing. Could you create a prompt for me I could use with your profile you just created so we could do market research role playing, where you play the sausage making enthusiast and I'll be the market researcher? ChatGPT responded with the following. Absolutely, here's a possible conversation starter. As the market researcher, you could begin by saying, hello, and there you go. Now I'll continue in the role of the sausage making enthusiast. Feel free to ask any questions you might have. This is not what I wanted, but it's what I needed. Again, if I was approaching this session with the mind of a programmer, I would scrap the session and I would have stopped there going, it's gone off the rails. Let's go back and figure it out. At best, I probably would have rewritten that last part of the prompt, or worse, I would have reacted with criticism. And I see this as a lot in prompt engineering, where they're brute forcing, frankly abusing ChatGPT. Again, there's nothing wrong with the programming approach. My theory is to get the most out of ChatGPT, you need to communicate, not program. ChatGPT is an LM, a large language. ChatGPT and humans will respond how they're programmed to respond 98% of the time. And yes, you and I, 98% of the time, are on complete autopilot. We are an organic ChatGPT. Think about it. It's not a subject for this video, but we will get into it down the track. As a communicator, there are several ways to go about responding to that particular answer. Communication responsibility is always on you, not the receiver. Suppose they didn't react the way that you wanted with your communication. That's on you. If you recall, way back at the start, when I first started researching in the session today, we had a similar situation. In that instance, I acknowledged the response and then reframed it. Classic communication technique. In this particular situation, I tried something else. In this case, I chose to go with improvisation. I do this naturally, and I remembered while I was writing this up for the video, report below, how excited I was with all the responses. I didn't even notice it was wrong at the time. Looking back, though, realized I was treating this session like a good improvisation class. One of the key rules of improv, whenever you're given something, like you're handed a situation or a phrase or whatever you're handed, the rule of improvisation is yes and. If you say, no, that's not a sausage, it's a shovel, you've just dropped your partner in the scene in the poo. So it's always, if they hand you a sausage, you work with the sausage. Yes and, all right? It's never not. And guess what? When it comes to communication and working with people in the real world, yes and is far more effective. You've all been in rooms where there's a brainstorming session and then somebody comes up with an idea and then the person goes, oh no, we tried that, it didn't work. It drops the level of the brainstorming session. Another topic for another time. When you're working with ChatGPT, we can use this improvisation principle, as I pretty much did naturally here. If you look at my session objective, job done, mission accomplished. I could have stopped here, but when I saw that response from ChatGPT, I immediately went scrambling for my notes so I could ask it the next series of questions in the testing process. If you approach ChatGPT sessions with curiosity, I think you'll get a lot more out of them. Instead of looking for wrong responses, and this is where I see there's this binary expectation. Is the answer right or is the answer wrong? Guess what, ladies and gentlemen? When you're speaking with another human being, there's levels of right and wrong. If you treat that human being with a binary response, yes or no, that's not going to work out. That relationship is not going to work out. Here's the thing. I think ChatGPT is pretty darn similar. It's completely understandable because most of the people, particularly in the early days working with prompt engineering, come from an IT programming background. It's quite natural to expect a computer to come back with the correct response. You don't expect a computer to come back with an incorrect response. As we know, humans come back with incorrect responses all the time. Have you seen my spelling in these prompts? So I took this opportunity to continue on with the conversation. We're going to cover that in the next video, where we start to look at the other tests. If you found today useful, I do hope that you'll like, subscribe, and ring that bell, as the kids say. It does help an enormous amount. Thank you all for watching. As a reminder, if you want to see everything, there is a report. If you click on the description below, you can grab a copy. You'll see the entire research, all the conversations, links to the conversations, everything. It's totally free. Just click on the link and you'll get access to it. All right, so please make sure you do that. I'm off to write this PersonaForge prompt. And of course, I'll be bringing all that to you. I'll be recording everything because I'm a baller and that's how I rock.